The South African Digital Marketing Podcast is made in collaboration with Sean Lutz. Coming up in this episode of the South African Digital Marketing Podcast.
It's not human traffic. Of course, some of it is.
More optimization is needed.
At its heart, good marketing is not all scientific.
And the questions that are being asked and the things that are being debated then, even with all the new technology, we're debating the same things.
Have we moved too far towards performance marketing?
Surely people would be very excited by the idea of, okay, how do I truly maximize on my budget?
About 6 months later, I said no. So we've got to do something about this.
Welcome to the South African Digital Marketing Podcast. My name is Terence Mentor, and I'm a digital marketer who's on a mission to meet the best, brightest, and most interesting marketers in the country. Today's guest is the director of truthsets.online, Marc Dhalluin. His work is really focused on making sure that all the money that marketers are spending on online advertising does what it's supposed to do, which is really to get their brands in front of human eyes. The real question that we want to answer today is, how do you really know that the numbers that are being reported to you are actually humans seeing your ads and seeing your marketing efforts? This is the kind of conversation that I love, where we go beyond the numbers and talk about what actually matters to marketers and the work that we do. So let's get right into it. Here's Marc.
I work out of LA, and I work exclusively now in wanting to see brands that use digital advertising get the share of voice that they deserve. And I'm not talking about brilliant creative, and I'm not talking about strategy. I'm talking about the actual blunt end, which is my media plan said I was supposed to get X, but I know that I didn't get X, and that's primarily as a result of digital ad fraud. And that's the button that got pushed for me about 3-4 years ago. In my marketing career, if I can call it that, the ad world and the client side, the most exciting part of anything was the ideation, was seeing agencies come up with ideas that made you hot and horny, or they didn't. And ultimately seeing these things go to market. That's the exciting part. And when I came across Dr. Augustine Fu, my partner is my brother-in-law. We're partners. He introduced me to this. He's been in media auditing for a very, very long time. And he said to me about more than 4 years ago, Marc, you must have a look at this. Look at what I've stumbled upon. And about 6 months later, I said no. So we've got to do something about this. I believed what I was seeing. I did a lot more research. It turned out I didn't have to do it, in fact, because there is an enormous amount out there, albeit it circulates amongst a group of very committed either absolute technophiles in the online media space or fraud investigators, as in it's a very closed cabal. And as I was saying to Dr. Augustine Fu is who I refer to as our principal. He's the one that gives us all the intellectual capital to understand what we understand. And I said to him, why doesn't the world know more about this? Why is it? These are my lay terms. This is not. Why does it appear to be a really well-kept secret? Or when somebody does stand up and shout about it, why does nothing happen? And in that is actually, I think, the tragedy of the story about why we are in 2026 and brands very often, and I'm picking my words here carefully, are not getting what they're paying for. And we're talking about insignificant numbers, not a few cents here and there.
This is one of the things that I found so fascinating in preparation for this conversation. Suddenly I'm starting to read a lot of the articles that you were sharing and a lot of the kind of the world that you were talking about, those niche people who are really invested and passionate about this concept of media fraud. But something that I found fascinating was actually how much it resonated. I've been in this game for close on 2 decades now, and there's always this tension of, wait a second, am I really getting bang for the buck? Because I have to go back to my manager, my head of marketing, my CFO, and I have to prove that the money I'm spending has some sort of makes business sense. And there always feels like there's a lot of finagling going on in that reporting to try and make it feel like it's justified.
And Terence, it is. In my sort of 2011, 12, 13, and I know it's a hell of a long time ago, one of our biggest, now bear in mind that the wave, the big change into digital was still happening, then. Yes, it's sort of the first big wave came arguably in the early 2000s, but these things take a long time to become significant. So here we are at Sun International, a very committed drive to being and using these new technologies and platforms. And simple conversations like, but why is the bounce rate on my website still 68% or 70%? Well, the explanation would go, we still obviously haven't cracked what the user was expecting when they decided to click through in the first place.
More optimization is needed.
Yes. Well, I know for 100% fact that if then I knew what I knew now, it's all bots. It's not human traffic. Of course, some of it is. And I think also what's important when I speak, it's not all black and all white. It's all in the center. It's the rubbish happens in these gray areas of I'm just not really sure. And that is why we say that without a forensic approach, without going down to the smallest possible detail, we can't actually uncover place and cause, because with place and cause, we can do something, both on good and bad. So, as I say, 15 years ago, we just spent more and more money trying to match content there with this here and having a hard time about what creative works and is the user journey too long? And hey, man, if I knew that 70% of that bounce traffic was bots, we would have put those $1 million somewhere else.
It is a little bit scary, though, because one of the things that got me into digital marketing in the first place was the kind of promise that you could get real insights in a way that the more traditional marketing never could. I spent a good part of my early years of my career in the radio industry, and I saw how much of the kind of numbers were thumb sucked. And, we had 1 million listeners, but are they really 1 million listeners and how long? And the kind of massaging of numbers for the advertisers' sakes that was happening. So when I kind of started into social media and especially digital marketing in general, I was like, great, I can get real numbers and make real campaigns that like truly affect real people.
Yeah.
And now we're starting to talk about the fact that actually maybe that's not as true as we originally thought. Is that the case? Will we bamboozled?
It's not as black and white as we originally wanted to believe. And in fact, it leads me onto the next thing, is that over the last couple of years, there's been an enormous amount of discussion about, has too much money been put into digital advertising generally? And here I'm talking non-large format. I'm not talking about CTV, a big screen. At the end of the day, have we moved too far towards performance marketing, because that is what the digital channels are best for, versus building our brands? And there's been a lot of discussion, particularly in the media here in the United States, about this in the last couple of years. And I think that at its heart, good marketing is not all scientific. A lot of good marketing is subjective, are decisions that are made not necessarily on the evidence of hard data. And I challenge myself, I challenge others, mention the top best brands in the world for you. Which are the ones that make you excited? Now think about why you got excited. And I can assure us that those brands didn't all build themselves only on hard data decisions. So I think the first thing is that this technology wave introduced a belief of certainty that allowed marketers to go, phew, I can show this now with likes and with visits to websites and blah, blah, blah. The other thing it did, it made the C-suite excited. Ha! They're asking for another $1 million because they're going to show us more likes or more this or more that. And in fact, I believe significantly that the general standards of marketing leadership generally are not what they used to be, because companies have allowed the business of marketing to be dumbed down because of data. For God's sake, data is so important, but it has a place. Now, to your point about in radio and my listenership was it X or whatever, in digital marketing, I'm getting these kind of results. In the 80s and 90s, we used to look at the Audit Bureau of circulation figures to decide which magazines to use. And we would avoid magazine A because 2 years previously, they'd been found to have had a print run of 150,000, of which 30,000 ended up in the Liesbeek River. My point, this nonsense around media efficiency and performance and fraud, it's not new at all, let alone digital just gave us the ability to tell more stories with numbers.
And it's interesting because as I've matured as a marketer, I've started to maybe not have the kind of experience over the generation, over the decades as you've had, but I've definitely started to feel that more and more and more, where suddenly I'm starting to go, oh, wait a second, I'm reading a article about marketing from 1980, and the questions that are being asked and the things that are being debated then, even with all the new technology, we're debating the same things miraculously.
Exactly. Listen, and you know, I got to tell you, 2005, 10, 13, I was totally caught up in this. I not for one moment questioned anything. I didn't say I've got to do it this way because I don't know any better. The answers that we were being given made sense. So a lot of what we're able to do today didn't exist the day before yesterday. And that's part of it as well, is that, yes, it may have been going on for a long time. And those people like Dr. Fu, our principal, who've been digging deep for so long, well, it wasn't known widely enough. We can talk about why it didn't spread very quickly, and that's as in, why did the spread not happen sooner? Why am I only talking to you today as opposed to you 3 years ago, assuming the podcast was going? Why are we having to shout from the rooftops today? It's because you're swimming upstream.
But that's fascinating, though, because you think in a world where marketing budgets are getting tighter and tighter and tighter, and there's more call for efficiencies, across the business, across business operations. Surely people would be very excited by the idea of, okay, how do I truly maximize on my budget? Surely this is a big conversation across the board.
No, it's not. Unfortunately, it's not. And it's not, firstly, it's systemic. It's built into the system now. Ad fraud volumes are high. A terrific stat. There are more online ads bought and paid for daily than there are human beings on earth who could ever consume them. If every single human being on earth had a web-enabled device, they would not be able to consume all the ads that are bought and paid for. Which advertiser is so stupid to buy something that's not going to be seen? None, not one. Not one advertiser is stupid enough. We believe that our ads are going to be seen, or we believe they'll have the opportunity to be seen, to be fair.
And again, the numbers should be reported fairly so that we would know whether or not they've been seen in hindsight. So I guess that brings me to my next big question about, we were talking, you mentioned that it's kind of systemic, it's built into the system, it's kind of all functioning in a particular way. Is there in this whole story, though, is there a bad guy or bad guys who are taking advantage of the system and are taking advantage of us? Or is it just kind of the Googles of the world and the Metas of the world that are doing the fraud?
No. Fraud is conscious. People say, Mark, what is ad fraud? It's the use of a technology or a technique to deliver ad impressions and or grow conversions for profit, but not give the advertiser what they thought they wanted. What does it mean? It means a bad person, a criminal, consciously games the system using techniques and technology to deliver to you what you thought you were buying, but you weren't doing it. I bought 1 million ad impressions, spaces on a web page or in an app or on a TV screen or whatever, a monitor. I thought I was going to be in front of 500 Terence mentors. Well, actually, you were in front of nobody. You were in front of but the platform reported that you were in front of the people and that the ad was shown to completion. Bullshit. Okay, that's what we're talking about. A conscious manipulation of that fact. I wanted to show my display ad to an audience of people who have a propensity to do X, and I bought 1 million impressions to do it. I expect that I got 1 million impressions in placements that a human could see. No, you didn't. Now, why didn't I? Wi-Fi dropout, the ad couldn't load. These are little things. That's not fraud. That just happens. But what about the 30% here that I can't account for? Well, have a look here. You'll see that it was bot traffic, as in fake traffic, or it was shown on apps that aren't even being used. Who the hell goes to sleep at night staring at their alarm clock app? By the way, we can't even argue whether that's fraud or not, because it's a genuine app, it is in use. The fact that it was open because the alarm clock's ticking, but the user was asleep, we don't call that fraud. We just call that poor media selection. Oh, right. But I was on the open web, or rather, sorry, I was doing this programmatically. Better start building your exclusion lists then. You should say, I never want to be on an alarm clock app. And then we get worse. There is still a class, it's not a class actually, Uber in the United States still has $100 million, and this has been going for 10 years, $100 million lawsuit against a couple of providers, some of them are settled, for fake app downloads. Because way back when, Uber would say to companies, I will pay you to get people to download my app. Well, I go along, I get fake traffic, and fake traffic can be both human and it can be digital. If I have a building full of people who have no job to do other than to sit and download an Uber app, bot farms they're called, click farms they're called, bot networks. The word bot is used quite loosely now. It's not just a bit of script. It can be, when we talk in fraud terms, bot is just rubbish. It's something that's not good. But click farms have been known for ages. And in fact, click fraud is arguably the most widely accepted, not like form of fraud. Oh, fake clicks. So it's all about not being able, I'll tell you what, you cannot trust that what you've bought has been delivered.
One of my favorite things about doing this particular podcast is that I get to meet some brilliant and insightful marketers on a regular basis. And then those guests become people that I can continue to have great conversations with months or years after the episode goes live. I think all marketers in South Africa should have the opportunity to have the same experience, and I think it should be at a cost that is really accessible for pretty much everyone. That's why I'm so excited about the SA Marketers Circle. It's a WhatsApp-based community where marketers get to meet, chat, get insights, and share in the particular experience that comes with doing this job in this country. If you click the link in the show notes right now, you'll get access to the early bird special to join the circle. That's 100 Rand per month for life, but that's only available to the first 100 people, and there are already some people in the community, so you better get on that. As the circle grows, we'll be able to unlock new perks like masterclasses and knowledge hubs and even in-person meetings. That's why it's so important for you to join as soon as possible. The South African Marketers Circle, where South African marketers think out loud. So that is very scary, and I can hear all of the marketing leaders that listen to this podcast screaming and running off to the hills, because if a company like Uber is still struggling to get some sort of recourse on this, it does seem like a big part of the issue is the organizations that are the platforms where these kinds of, the Google display ads or whichever system you're going through, whichever meta ads you're going through, wherever you're doing this kind of paid advertising, they're incentivized to not show you that these are bots. They're incentivized to make it seem like your campaign has done so amazingly well. How do we negotiate that? How do we somehow figure out, you've mentioned there's strategies like exclusion events and those lists that you can put into place, but how do we change the system?
I think it's really important to make a distinction between good publishers and bad publishers. I don't think that Google and YouTube, who 3 years ago got caught up in a massive scandal, and it was a scandal, I don't think they go out to consciously defraud anybody. That there is wastage on their platforms, yes. That Facebook or any of these walled gardens, as we refer to them, have problems with fake accounts and so on, which then have unintended consequences, putting up bullshit advertising as in ads for fake products, which is not our remit. There are a lot of unintended consequences of the sophistication and of this technological environment. Our primary focus is on looking at the people who go out of their way to defraud. Now, yes, we'll do an analysis, not we will do. We'll say to somebody, let's have a look at the traffic quality from your Facebook campaigns or Google search and so on, which can only, by the way, be measured on a landing page because those platforms do not allow independent verification or measurement on their platforms. So we do say if your vendor who you're using to help you understand how good your campaigns are is telling you this is what's happening on Meta, they're talking nonsense. They're saying this is what Meta told us is happening on Meta's platforms. There's a very, very significant difference. I think that we really need to distinguish between good and bad. The good publisher, if you show them rubbish traffic, they will want to do something about it. Now, bear in mind that not all traffic that is not good for advertising is necessarily fraud. Half the internet is bots. Half the traffic on the internet are computer scripts running around. And there are good bots. There are bots from a marketing point of view. They come along to my website and they index it for organic ranking. That's a good bot. But when that bot hits my website, by the way, it causes an ad to load. It didn't ask to. That's the way the technology works. Traffic in, ad loads. What ad loads? Well, the publisher gave its profile to a seller of inventory. It said the people who read my website are, or look at my website. So that's inadvertent waste. Let's go and find the ones where it's not inadvertent. Why am I saying this as well? We said earlier, nothing's black or white. There is so much rubbish out there that to take it all on, let alone try and get well-respected publishers to do even better. And the good guys do good stuff. Make no bones about it.
I do want to kind of dig into that just a little bit, because I like the fact that you're not throwing the baby out of the bathwater and saying, don't do any more digital marketing, don't do any more paid stuff online, back to billboards and live reads on radio. Those not that there's still a space for those as well, but it does feel like you're advocating for really more mindful use of which tools we're using, what platforms we're using, what publishers we're selecting. But when it comes to maybe the other side of the campaign, you've done your best to, follow a healthy strategy of choosing the right spaces, and choosing the right kind of publishers. You're now getting some numbers back. Is there ways where you can tell just from looking at, I don't know, web traffic versus the amount of impressions on the ad, for instance? Are there strategies where you can go, wait a second, this campaign looked like it did really well, but in reality, I can see that there was some fraud that happened on this campaign?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So the verification, or in our case, the analytics is running live. The minute it is implemented, and the implementation as in, how do I get this thing going? It's a tag. It's like a Google Ad Manager tag. It gets deployed at campaign level on the creative work. Effectively, what's happening is this tag is following your ads around. It's going with the ad to the platform that you supposedly chose, or to the one that the seller decided to send it to. And it's then doing its analysis. So the answer is absolutely. You're seeing the good, enormous amounts of good, and you're seeing the bad at the same time. And you are then in the middle saying, well, what do I do to get more good, less bad, when none of it is black and white? And what do I mean by that? We will often see a platform, as in a publisher, that has a mixture of good and bad on it. And you and I know this. I'm going to call it a newspaper because I'm an old man. We know this newspaper like the back of our hands. We used to read it when it was literally paper. And we know people read it today. But then why is 20% of what my impressions they're looking like they've gone to shit? I'm not going to get rid of that publisher, because they're also delivering quality. So what do? I go to them and I show them I'm not happy with this amount of wastage, and I can prove it. Well, maybe they'll renegotiate my rate. But I'm not going to throw the baby out of the bathwater. Yes, Terence, live campaigns, whatever the results are, we can at the same time say, this is where the good's coming from and this is where bad.
There's a definite sigh of relief that comes through, but this does feel like such a big topic. Even though it's, like we were saying at the beginning, it should be something that is kind of spoken about with every new marketing strategy that starts, at the beginning of the year. We should be talking about how do we put in place measures to make sure that we're not falling victims of fraud, that we're, protecting ourselves against, at the very least, using our ad spend in the most effective way. So this is a much bigger conversation, and I can feel the people listening going, I can take this conversation in, but I need more. So I guess my last question for you is, like, where can people go to get more information, to maybe be part of that conversation that we were saying at the beginning of the episode with all the people that are actually, who really care deeply about this and are talking about this? Where can I find that community?
If one does a general search, I got to tell you, the AI responses here are rather good as well in terms of consolidating. Do a general search about what don't I know about online advertising fraud. There is so much written. There's an enormous amount. And you'll see people like Dr. Fu, like companies like Oxford Biocrinetics, let alone the well-established vendors. There are we call them legacy vendors. They've been around for years and years and years. Our contention has been that if they've done their job well, why do we have such a problem we have today? Secondly, why up until 2024, and I know I'm going a little bit down the track, why up until 2024 were the world's largest advertising leadership bodies still not pushing back against the belief that ad fraud is only 1%? The Trustworthy Accountability Group of the United States that gets its numbers from the legacy vendors was still publishing ad fraud at 1%. We have a big problem. There is so much information out there. There are lots of companies that deal with ad fraud in one way or the other. Some say bot blockers. We block bots. That's great. But we're saying, what's the point of bot? First thing, you can't block a bot before it gets to your ad unless you are the publisher. So publishers can step up. But once again, good publishers don't have a big problem with the traffic quality. It's the bad boys and girls that have well, it's not a problem for them. It's an absolute gold mine. So there is an enormous amount out to be read. LinkedIn as a single source has huge amounts, but the topic has been covered. Wall Street Journal, Forbes, some of the South African publications, Marc Dhalluin has actually done quite a lot of coverage there over the last year or two. The information is there. And the job, I believe, of any advertiser is not to say I must go and spend money on an analytics platform. It must be to go and say, how do I find out what my picture looks like? Because not all are the same. Some are better than others. Some are worse than others. Why? It depends on campaign setup. Anyway, it's out there. Read about it.
A huge thank you to Marc for joining me in the SA Digital Marketing Podcast. He was actually joining from LA, so he woke up very, very early to have this conversation. I'm sure a lot of what he said encouraged you to dig deeper, and you can do that by connecting with Marc on LinkedIn. Remember to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any of the new episodes that are coming out for Season 5. That's going to be coming out every couple of weeks or so. And finally, join me and other great marketers in the SA Marketer Circle. The link to do all of those things will be in the show notes. Thanks so much for listening. This was the SA Digital Marketing Podcast.